It was a time in Florence filled with sounds, colors, and prayers. The walls of the churches were grand, but their souls felt empty. There were icons, yet they were all the same. Faces frozen, gazes motionless, distant from humanity. Art was only rules, and breaking those rules was considered a sin. In this world, a young painter emerged. His name was Cimabue. He picked up the brush not just to paint, but to change the world. Cimabue brought to the canvas not only sacred figures, but human emotions: sorrow, joy, fear, hope. His Madonnas were no longer just icons. They looked, thought, and felt. He moved away from the rigid, motionless Byzantine style, and for the first time brought light and shadow to faces. This was the first bold step of the great wave that would later be called the Renaissance. Some criticized him, others watched in admiration, but everyone understood one thing: something was changing in art. This is not only the story of a single painter, but the awakening of European art itself. It begins with Cimabue and leads toward a new way of seeing the world. Fact 1. His real name was Ceni di Beppo, or Pepe. Cimabue was not his birth name, it was a nickname. Historical sources indicate that the painter's real name was Ceni di Beppo, sometimes written as Ceni di Pepe. Ceni was his given first name. Di Beppo, di Pepe, in Italian means son of Beppo. In medieval Italy, this was common. Instead of family surnames, people were often identified by their father's name. What does Cimabue mean? Cimabue is believed to be a nickname he received when he was young. Its exact meaning is debated, but several interpretations exist. Possibly head of a goat, meaning stubborn or strong-willed. Some think it meant bull-headed or hard to deal with. Most historians agree it likely referred to his temperament and pride. Nicknames were normal among artists of that era, and many became the names they were historically remembered by. That is why he is known to history not as Ceni di Beppo, but as Cimabue. Why is his real name sometimes debated? Medieval documents are incomplete. Spellings vary between sources. Vasari and others relied partly on oral tradition. However, most scholars agree. His real name was Ceni di Beppo. Cimabue became the famous artistic name. Fact 2. He guided a boy who would change art. Giotto. Some mornings in Florence were quieter than others. On one of those mornings, history says, Cimabue saw a boy. Not in a palace, not in a school, but in the fields. The boy was drawing on stone with a piece of charcoal, sheep grazing around him, wind gently moving the grass like waves. Yet those small drawings were different. They were not stiff. They were not silent. They were alive. Cimabue stopped. He watched, and he felt the same thing he felt in front of his own paintings. This child's lines are breathing. That shepherd boy's name was Giotto. Cimabue took him by the hand and brought him from the open fields into the living heart of Florence. He did not only teach him how to hold the brush, he taught him how to listen to human emotion inside forms, how to let faces speak, how to let walls become stories. Giotto would later give weight and movement to bodies, fill eyes with tears, hope, fear, love, push open the doors of the Renaissance even wider. So they say, Cimabue lit the first candle, Giotto carried the flame forward, and just like in a garden where one rose opens and others follow with courage, Cimabue opened and Giotto bloomed after him. That is why fact 2 is this: Cimabue was not only a great painter himself, he became the mentor of the boy who would change the future of art. Fact 3. He was one of the first great masters to move from the Byzantine style to more natural, lifelike painting. In those days, paintings seemed frozen in time. There were faces, but no feeling. There were eyes, but no soul. That was the Byzantine style. Sacred, but distant. There were people, but not much humanity in them. And then one day, a different hand touched the surface of the panel. It was the hand of Cimabue. He seemed to ask, if God came into the world as a human, shouldn't humans in paintings also look truly human? So he gave figures breath. He warmed cheeks with color, brought depth into eyes and weight into bodies. The saints in his paintings no longer floated far away in golden stillness. They stepped closer to ordinary people, close enough to feel real, close enough to be touched. Cimabue did not simply place colors side by side. He let light speak through them. Shadows softened the scenes, and for the first time sorrow and joy became clearly visible on painted faces. It was a bridge. On one side, rigid, motionless Byzantium on the other, living, breathing Renaissance. And among the first to cross that bridge was Cimabue. With his brush, he seemed to say, "Painting is not only sacred form, painting is the story of a feeling human being." From then on, the figures on the walls did not only look at us, they began to answer us. Fact 4. One of his most famous works is the large panel paintings of Maista. Among Cimabue's works, one theme rises like a crown, Maista. It means majesty, the Madonna and child seated on a throne. These are not small images whispering from the corner of a chapel. They are huge golden panels, glowing like sunlight caught on wood. In these paintings, the Virgin sits on a high throne, the child rests in her arms, angels gather around, like soft waves of color. But what makes Cimabue's Maista special is this. The Madonna is not only a symbol, she feels alive. Her eyes are thoughtful, gentle, slightly sorrowful, as if she already senses both love and destiny. Cimabue's famous Maista panels include the Santa Trinita, Maista in Florence, the Maista of the Louvre the Assisi, Maista fresco fragments. In them, gold still shines like Byzantium, but beneath the gold, a new world is quietly beginning to breathe. It is as if Cimabue said through these works, majesty is not only power, it is also tenderness. And from these thrones of light, the Renaissance slowly began to rise. Fact 5. Cimabue painted traditional gold background icons, but he increased the emotion in the faces. And that was something new. Cimabue did not completely break with tradition. He still painted golden backgrounds that glowed like quiet suns in churches. The figures still sat in majesty, surrounded by light that seemed to come from heaven itself. But then, he did something different. He touched the faces. Where earlier icons were calm and distant, his figures began to feel. In his paintings, eyebrows bend gently and worry lips hold back a small, tender sorrow. Eyes look not through us, but into us. This was new. In a world where holy images were meant to be still and untouchable, Cimabue allowed them to become human and emotional. It was as if he whispered to the gold background, "Holiness is not cold. Holiness can feel." The saints in his works no longer looked like symbols carved from stone. They looked like beings who had known love, loss, hope, and fear. And in that subtle change, from rigid icon to living face, the first heartbeat of the Renaissance could be heard. Fact 6. He was also a master of mosaic. When we speak of Cimabue, we often think of panels and frescoes, but his art did not live on paint alone. He also worked in mosaic, that ancient language of tiny stones and shining glass, a language older than him, older than Florence, older than the Renaissance that was just beginning to breathe. Imagine a wall glowing in half darkness, sunlight slipping in through a small church window, touching thousands of golden fragments. Each piece is no bigger than a fingernail, yet together they sing like a choir. That is mosaic, and Cimabue understood that language. He worked on sacred images made from pieces of colored glass, stone, gilded tesserae that captured and broke light into warmth. In mosaic, there is no quick correction. You cannot simply paint over a mistake. Every small square must be chosen, placed, pressed, and trusted. It is slow work, patient work, work of a person who listens to silence. Cimabue's hand, already trained in painting soft expressions, now had to think in fragments. Light broken into tiny pieces, shadow built from countless darker tones, emotion assembled like a delicate puzzle. In the Pisa Cathedral, his name is connected with the great mosaic of Christ, a figure not flat and distant, but heavy with presence. A body that seems to occupy real space, a face that seems aware of you as you stand before it. Through mosaic, he learned something important. Emotion does not come only from brushstrokes. It can also grow from stone, from glass, from light itself. Mosaic taught him discipline of structure, rhythm of repeating forms, how light lives differently on a broken surface. And mosaic, in turn, learned something from him: How a face can feel, how holiness can be warm, how an image can be sacred and human at once. So when we say Cimabue the painter, we are telling only half the truth. He was also a builder of images, stone by stone, a composer of light, a patient craftsman who understood that beauty sometimes arrives slowly. Just as a garden grows petal by petal, a mosaic grows piece by piece. And Cimabue, with the calm of someone who is not in a hurry, let both gardens bloom, one in color and brushstroke, the other in glass and golden light. Fact 7. According to medieval sources, Cimabue was the teacher of Giotto history, sometimes moves quietly. Not with battles, but with one teacher noticing one child. Medieval writers tell us a story. Cimabue was already a respected painter in Florence, known for faces that seemed to feel, for saints that seemed almost ready to step down from the wall. One day, while traveling through the countryside, he noticed a boy. The boy was not in a studio and not in a classroom. He was watching sheep, but at his feet, on a flat stone, was a drawing, made not with fine pigments, but with a simple piece of charcoal. The figures he drew were not stiff or symbolic. They leaned, turned, laughed, moved. They had weight, gesture, life. Cimabue looked at the boy and then at the drawing, and something inside him became very quiet. He recognized the rarest thing in the world, not just talent, but a new way of seeing. The boy's name was Giotto di Bondone. Cimabue took him under his protection. He brought him from the open pastures to the heart of Florence, from the language of fields to the language of fresco and gold. In his workshop, Giotto ground pigments, prepared panels, mixed tempera, with egg yolk, watched, listened, absorbed. But more importantly, he learned how to look at the world. Cimabue did not only teach him technique, he taught him courage. Courage to bend a rigid rule, courage to give saints real human tears, courage to let bodies carry real weight, courage to let emotions exist openly on faces. And then something beautiful happened, something that happens rarely in history. The student went further than the master. Giotto took Cimabue's tenderness and added space, volume, perspective, and movement. Figures now stood solidly on the earth, shadows curved around them, stories unfolded like theater on church walls. Because of this, people say, Cimabue opened the window, Giotto let the fresh air flood the room. Medieval writers like Giorgio Vasari preserved this story, and even if details may contain legend, the spirit of it feels true. The Renaissance did not appear suddenly, it was passed from hand to hand, from teacher to student, like a candle's flame lighting another candle. So fact 7 is this: Cimabue was not only a great artist himself, he became the mentor of the boy who would transform Western art. And somewhere in the invisible history of classrooms and workshops, in the smell of pigments and wood shavings, a quiet moment occurred. A master leaned over a child's shoulder, and the future of art leaned forward with him. Fact 8. Vasari described him as one of the artists who began the Renaissance. Centuries after Cimabue lived, another artist and writer looked back at history and tried to understand where the great change in art truly began. His name was Giorgio Vasari, painter, architect, storyteller of artists' lives. When Vasari wrote about Cimabue, he did not see only a medieval painter with gold backgrounds and sacred figures. He saw a spark. Vasari said that Cimabue was one of the artists who began the Renaissance, who loosened the chains of rigid tradition and allowed art to turn its face toward the living world again. Before Cimabue, according to Vasari, painting followed strict formulas. Figures were symbols rather than people expression, belonged more to heaven than to earth. But in Cimabue's works, Vasari noticed something different. Heads tilt gently, hands move with intention, faces carry sorrow, sweetness, doubt, and tenderness. He saw life returning to images. To Vasari, Cimabue was like the first light before sunrise. Not yet the full bright sun of Leonardo and Michelangelo, but the moment when darkness begins to soften, when you know morning is coming. Even before it arrives, Vasari did not claim Cimabue finished the journey. He said Cimabue started it. He imagined history as a long path. Cimabue takes the first step, Giotto walks further. Masaccio, Donatello, Brunelleschi continue, Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo bring the noonday sun. Cimabue's importance, in Vasari's eyes was not only in what he painted, but in what he made possible. He gave permission, quietly, bravely, for artists to look at real body study, real emotions, observe the human world with love instead of fear. And this is why Vasari wrote about him with such respect. To call someone the beginning of the Renaissance is not just historical praise, it is recognition that this person helped the world remember its own humanity. So fact 8 is this. According to Giorgio Vasari, Cimabue was one of the painters who set the Renaissance in motion, not by shouting, but by painting faces that felt alive again. And perhaps that is how great changes always begin. Not with thunder, but with a single brush stroke that dares to be warmer, softer, more human than before. Fact 9. Although some of his works were damaged by earthquakes in time, they still hold great value as turning points in art history. Time is not gentle with walls. Churches crack, plaster falls, colors fade, and the earth itself sometimes shakes as if history were breathing in its sleep. Cimabue's works were not protected in museums behind glass. They lived on church walls, wooden panels, exposed to centuries of earthquakes, humidity, smoke from candles, touch of weather, and human hands. Some of his frescoes in Assisi were shattered when the basilica was struck by earthquakes. Fragments fell, dust rose, and for a moment it seemed as if part of history itself had broken. Yet even in pieces, even faded, cracked, incomplete, Cimabue's works still speak. You can stand before a damaged panel and feel the softness he brought to faces, the first movement after centuries of rigidity, the courage of an artist changing direction. Art historians do not value his work only because it survived. They value it because it changed the path of painting. Before him, images were formula. After him, images began to live. So even when gold leaf has dulled colors, have thinned parts or missing forever, the meaning remains untouched. It is like an old rose bush in a ruined garden. The wall may crumble, but the fragrance is still there. That is why Fact 9 says, even though time and earthquakes damaged some of Cimabue's works, they still hold immense importance, because they mark a turning point where art began to move from sacred rigidity to human feeling. And sometimes history honors not the painting that is perfect, but the painting that changed everything. Even if today it survives with cracks, like a memory written across broken stone. Fact 10. His death. Quiet, but his influence lived on. Cimabue died around 1302, most likely in Florence or nearby Pisa. There were no trumpets, no grand ceremonies, just the quiet passing of a man who had already changed art. He left the world much as he had worked in it, calmly, without noise, without demanding attention. But after his death, something remarkable happened. His students continued his vision, his ideas flowed into Giotto, and from Giotto into the Renaissance masters. So although Cimabue's life ended in the early 14th century, his influence did not. His death was quiet, but the movement he began kept growing, like a rose that continues to bloom long after the gardener is gone.